hello, welcome. We are glad with everyone joining us today, everyone watching online, and everyone watching this later. We are here to take an important step in the continued process of making sure that Montgomery County serves our residents and our values as we advance progress. So I am Sarah Kogel-Smucker, the Climate Change Officer for Montgomery County. I will be emceeing today. We will hear from Speaker County Executive Marc Elrich, Council Vice President Balcom, Council Member Jawando, and Council Member Mink. And then there will be an executive order signing. There will be time for Q&A afterwards. And there are a number of folks in the room to acknowledge in addition to our speakers. I want to acknowledge Council Member Glass attending. And a number of community organizations, the West Montgomery County Citizens Association, Food and Water Watch, Sugarloaf Citizens Association, Chesapeake Climate Action Network, Climate Coalition, Montgomery County Side Alliance, and Sierra Club. There'll be an opportunity to speak to some representatives from these organizations after the press conference. So without further ado, I want to just very briefly acknowledge this issue. We are not alone in Montgomery County in grappling with data centers. Data centers are something communities all across the country are grappling with. It turns out that the internet is not a cloud, it's physical. It is a big building with servers. It is fiber optic cables. It is wires. It takes energy. It makes noise. It uses water. And it provides innovation and economic development. And here in Montgomery County, we are committed to getting that right so that we are balancing a range of community concerns. And leading the way in getting it right is our County Executive, Marc Elrich.
Thank you. I'll tell you a quick cloud story, because I like to think of myself as pretty tech savvy. And we were having a debate in the county about it. We actually had a sort of a data center in the council office building. And we had a controversy over what we were going to do, and there was a bunch of issues swimming around, and the company came in, people started talking about the cloud. And I said, what's the cloud? I mean, how did this stuff work up in the air? I mean, what is this? And the guy says, you know that room that you got your servers in the county building? That's a cloud. I said, oh, so it's just servers someplace. And so they were offering us cloud service, and all it meant was they were going to move the box of servers from their place to another place. And that's when I realized that when we went out to Ashburn, it was just a bunch of cages that looked like what would have been our data center, but it's cages for like maybe 200 companies rather than cages for just us. So it was kind of like a learning experience. And but cloud is new to a lot of us. I think all of us were just wondering what the cloud was because nobody explained it. They just said we're going to have things in the cloud. So knowing what it was helpful. Today I'm signing an executive order directing the Department of Permitting Services to temporarily pause the acceptance and processing of permit applications for new data centers in Montgomery County. And I want to explain why I'm taking this step. First, it's not a ban on data centers. It's not a statement that data centers should never be built in Montgomery County, and it's not a judgment on any specific proposal. What this does is create a time for Montgomery County to establish clear rules and expectations before applications begin moving through the permitting process. I'll just say one of the first things I was concerned about is the council trying to get something done before somebody puts an application in. And I didn't want the consideration of what to do shaped by I've got to get this done in a month because they're going to have an application in a month. It should get done, and it should get done right with the amount of research and thought put into it that needs to be put into it. And nobody should think I have to get this done before they drop a data center permit in. So my goal was to create 6 months of space to get this work done, and I think this work can be done. Right now, Montgomery County doesn't have regulations that specifically address data centers. We have zoning and permitting rules that apply generally to development, but we don't have a framework that fully addresses the unique issues that data centers raise. And some of those issues include energy consumption and the resulting effect on energy costs, water use, environmental impacts, visual impacts on neighboring communities, effects on parks and natural resources, and the demands these facilities place on infrastructure. We've never had to think about any of that for the kind of things that go through permitting. And so to put a project like this through there, which can be relatively enormous, and to not have guidelines that give us the ability to track with the specific issues these projects raise, I think would have been an unfair situation to put our folks in. So I want to make sure we've got time to think about this. The County Council obviously recognized these questions when it introduced legislation earlier this year regarding data centers, and the council already held a public hearing and is in the process of concerning what those rules should look like. At the same time, the state of Maryland is conducting a comprehensive assessment of data centers and their impacts. That work's expected to continue through this year. I believe it makes sense to have these discussions to take place before permit applications move forward. A couple of reasons for that. I don't want a project going through the county's review process before we considered what rules should apply to the data center. That would be counterproductive. And I especially don't want a project to be submitted before we have the new guidelines and to then have to be concerned about getting them approval before getting an approval before the guidelines are in place. I don't want an approval coming out of my permitting department before the guidelines are created. The other thing I don't want is I don't want somebody to go through that process and then for us to say, oh, by the way, we changed the rules, because nothing that hurts us more in the general perception about how we work on things is the idea that we say you can do something and then we change the rules on you after you've done a lot of work. Whatever they're going to do, it's going to cost them a bunch of money to go through a permitting process. They should go through it once. They should submit one application based on a set of rules. We should not put them in a position where we're going to change the rules and go back through this again. So I think it's good for everybody to understand what the rules are going to be before anybody tries to go forward. Data centers are becoming an increasingly important part of our economy, and they support cloud computing, artificial intelligence, research, communications, and a lot of services that people use every day. But at the same time, local governments across the country are grappling with questions about their long-term impacts on energy demand, land use, environmental sustainability, and quality of life. None of those things should be sacrificed for a data center. So we've got to find a way, if we're going to do this, to make sure we don't lose the things we value in the pursuit of, frankly, is money. Because from our perspective, this is pretty much about, at the end of the day, does the revenue from this come here, or does the revenue go someplace else? So if we're doing it for money, we should not sacrifice our community on that altar. That would not be a good choice to make. People have legitimate questions. Those questions deserve answers. The county deserves the opportunity to complete its legislative work and not to have a race against the project trying to get through the approval process before they finish. And applicants deserve to know what standards they'll have to apply to their project. This executive order provides that opportunity. The pause is temporary. It's a 6-month, and it expires in 6 months unless it's extended. And it could end sooner if the council adopts adequate legislation governing data centers. So my goal here is pretty straightforward. I want Montgomery County to make an informed decision. I want the council to have time it needs to do its job right. I want any future discussions about data centers to take place within a clear set of rules that have been debated publicly and adopted through our legislative process. That's how good planning is supposed to work. That's why I'm doing it. So, do you want me to sign it?
I absolutely want you to sign it. We have a couple of other speakers first. Next, we have Council Vice President Balcom representing District 2 and her role in the Transportation and Environment Committee engaged in these issues.
Thank you. So first I want to thank the county executive. You've been a terrific partner in the Dickerson Data Center project, and I appreciate your continual commitment to making sure that we get these restrictions in place and we keep our environment and our people safe. So I really appreciate your partnership on this. And I also want to thank Ms. Kogel-Smucker for your subject matter expertise and to come up with a framework for the types of things that we needed to put into the legislation. As mentioned, I'm the council member for District 2. So the old coal plant in Dickerson is in my district. And as I came into this role 3.5 years ago, this was one of the projects that just landed in my lap. And I didn't know anything about data centers and all the complexities. And that was long before data centers hit the zeitgeist. We were moving along with this project, trying to come up with restrictions. And after working on the Dickerson proposal for years now, I know that establishing appropriate restrictions is complicated, and it continues to shift based on the technology and based on the studies that come out. This moratorium will provide additional time to make sure that no data center moves forward until restrictions are in place. So we have a zoning text amendment that was introduced. We also have amendments to that ZTA that have been published. They will be introduced at the work session. And the moratorium does not mean that we stop. What it means is that we work harder. And I really appreciate my colleagues being here to signify their willingness to roll up their sleeves and start working on water, energy, noise, the underground hum, all of those things that we need to make sure that we get in place, and we need help to do that. And I also just want to thank the community, the residents of Dickerson, and also the environmental groups that have been very willing to meet time and time and time and time again. And so I feel like this is the beginning. We all need to work together to make sure that the CTA does everything that we need it to do. And we have a lot of work to do. And as always, I so appreciate your partnership. So thank you.
Thank you, Council Vice President. Next, we have Councilmember Will Joando, Councilmember at Large, advocating for clarity and transparency and community benefits on data center issues and others.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon. Thank you to the county executive. I'm really grateful for his leadership and for our residents for being here as well, the community groups that are here. We have to get, I've said this multiple times. We don't want to be first, we want to be right. And data centers is a very, very important example of that. Last month, I introduced Bill 2426, along with Councilmember Mink, a 2-year moratorium on building permits for data centers. Currently, it is the only bill before the council that covers the proposed data center in Dickerson that we're talking about here today, the 300 megawatt data center that would produce more carbon emissions than a small city. This is not only about some project down the road, it's about this one in particular. A bill takes time. You heard from my colleague. There are a lot of issues here. Councilmember Mink and I sent a letter this week to the county executive urging this moratorium, and I'm really happy that he's doing it today. We might not agree on every single issue related to the moratorium, but the important thing is we do agree that we need time to make sure we get this right. We can't wait to protect our watershed. We can't wait to protect our communities from industrial noise, and that's where the noise ordinance comes in. We know that the Potomac Interceptor project has highlighted how dangerously at risk our Potomac River is, one of the most at risk, if not the most at risk river in the country. We need to make sure, and not just a wink and a nod, that water won't be coming out of the Potomac to cool these systems. There's technology that doesn't allow that, but we need to require that. We can't wait for clean energy assurances. It needs to be required. Renewable power on the grid, including for backup generators. No offsets, no credits, no promises. We want to make sure it's required and it's part of the law and regulation. And we have to protect our working families that are struggling with high utility bills. Our residents are already squeezed because of data center development in other parts of the region, and we shouldn't be asked to subsidize billion-dollar tech companies. So we can't wait also to make sure that this is, if they are built, they're built with union labor. And we need to require that. That's one I haven't talked about a lot, but that will be very important to me. If they're going to be built, they need to be built by people that are getting paid a living, sustaining wage. Real benefits, strongest safety standards in the industry, and that needs to be locked in as a part of a community benefit agreement prior to a shovel going into the ground or any approvals being given. Now, some have suggested we've got to hurry up, and today I think we're saying really clearly, no, we don't need to hurry up. We need to get it right. We need to put the appropriate regulations in place, because once a data center is built, you can't unbuild it. Once it starts emitting, there's no undoing that. No amount of revenue can restore the Potomac River or make sure that we are protecting our clean air and our clean water. And no amount of revenue, most importantly, or just as importantly, can reduce our electricity bills for folks in the region that are already too high. I understand, and I want to thank Atmosphere. They're trying to be a good partner. And I think many of them have good intentions, but good intentions are not assurances. We have to get this right, and real protections and real guarantees. This 6-month moratorium will get us to December, and we'll have a new county executive at that point. You heard from the current county executive that this is renewable. I would like to see us to work as fast and as hard as we can to get as much done as we can, but to also not rush, to make sure we get it right, and to make sure we put in the appropriate regulations. One of the reasons I put in a 2-year moratorium bill is not only because I wanted to cover Dickerson, but also because I think we need state law changes. A data center, and I'll say this again, should not pay the same property tax rate as a single-family home, which is currently what would happen unless the state gives us the authority to change that. 6 months gets us to December. The state legislature comes in January. So I want to see that happen as part of this process as well. But I am very thankful to the county executive, because I think this gives us some time and space and will avoid the moral hazard of application being sped through the process before we can get anything in place. Montgomery County is going to stand with their residents. We've heard loud and clear that they want us to take our time and get this right if we do it at all. So thank you again.
Thank you, Councilmember. And next we will hear from Councilmember Kristen Mink from District 5, who's been heavily involved in community concerns on this issue.
Thank you. I'm Kristen Mink, representing District 5 on the County Council, and I was very glad to be able to co-sponsor the bill that was introduced by my colleague, Councilmember Will Jawando. I was looking for action that would ensure that we covered Dickerson, the data center that we currently have in process right now, because as has been stated, you can't roll back the clock, and we have to make sure that we get this right from the jump. And I was also looking for legislation that would ensure that we have time to pass state legislation as needed. And so this was a bill that did that, and so I greatly appreciate Councilmember Jawando for his leadership in bringing that forward and in moving this conversation and in this action forward. And I also want to thank our county executive, Marc Elrich, who has responded with the sense of urgency that this moment really does require. And it is moments like this where we see teamwork between the community, the council, and the county executive that really makes me proud and grateful to be here in Montgomery County. We are going to make sure that, that these pieces get right and that they are right ahead of time. So we will work as quickly and as diligently as we possibly can, but as I think you're hearing from everybody, the most important thing is that we get this right. We are seeing in communities all across the country, communities that are begging their electeds to step in and undo, roll back the data centers that are currently harming their communities, that are harming their the quality of their water, the noise pollution, their utility bills, all of these impacts. And I will say, as this conversation first started coming to my attention in this very real and present way, and I said, oh, Dickerson, that's not my district. And then the more I learned, and thank you, advocates, and the more I delved into the research, I realized that these data centers, these large data centers, they have a very broad-reaching impact. So we really, all of us do need to be engaged on this issue for the future of data centers in Montgomery County, but including any projects that are starting to be in the works right now. All of us need to care about the impact, even if you're not seeing it happen right next door. So thank you very much to Councilmember Jawando. Thank you so much to the county executive. And thank you to the many community advocates who we have been hearing from for so long, who have done such diligent research and who made sure that we got to this place in time. Thank you all.
Thank you. We will now take questions from the media for any speakers. So if the council members who spoke want to come up so they're available for questions as well. Yes?
Hi, I know that Councilmember Duomo, I believe, mentioned there have been multiple pieces of legislation that propose moratorium. Does this preclude that? Will those bills still be under consideration? Could someone just kind of explain how that will work as we move forward?
Thank you. So that's a good question. We have a public hearing on Tuesday. That public hearing will go forward. The bills will advance the same way as they'd been in the past.
And to make clear also, the executive order pauses all permitting. That's at DPS.
Can you explain why this is happening now? I know there were calls, for example, to form a study on this issue. I know that in the past other communities have been talking about this. Why now? What's the urgency now versus 6 months ago?
So 6 months ago, if I'd put a 6-month moratorium on while the council was working on the budget, those 3 months would have been mostly burned by the council working on the budget and not working on this. Doing it now, the council's clear of the budget. They don't have anything else that's going to consume massive amounts of time, I don't think. So this gives them the opportunity to focus on this, which I think is of paramount importance. And so I felt like this is the best time to do it. And it could last, as Will said, until the end of my term, or it could be resolved before then. But either way, I feel like it gives enough time. And I just want to add that our folks and Sarah's team have done a good job of providing information about what exists in the world of data centers already, which I think will be very useful for the committee to look at, because one thing that's important for us to know is what's already been done. There have been some really good agreements out there, and there have been some really bad agreements out there. So looking at what people have been able to negotiate in the way of good agreements is something we should learn from. So we've got the time to actually research things and get a better picture.
And a follow-up on that,
Yeah.
have you been in touch with the folks who have already established or tried to establish that they will have a footprint in Dickerson, access?
Atmosphere.
And have you been in touch with WSSC regarding concerns about water? Any of their expertise helping you there in terms of the concerns about heated water or warmed water going into the Potomac or being taken out of the Potomac?
We haven't, but I've been focused from the very beginning that water has to go in at the same temperature or very close to it. I don't need somebody else to tell me that it does not make sense to put hot water back in the Potomac River. We're not going to put hot water back in the river. It's going back close to where it came out.
Briefly, can I say something briefly on that? So just on that, I've met with the company. I know many of us have. They have said to me that 2 or 3 degrees, not a big deal. It is a big deal. As I mentioned, the latest technology, you don't have to do that at all. It can recirculate. It costs more, but that's an example of a requirement that I think should be in place. I don't think we should be taking any water. And when I was presented with this months ago, it might have changed to the points that were made. It has changed. Where there was some thought that it might be coming out of the Potomac. But now I think the latest data centers use the recirculating water. Another thing that's a question you had, other jurisdictions. In some places, they're requiring NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, about what the community benefits are. I think that's something we should not have, because we should be getting the best deal possible and making sure, and we should have that information. That's a national issue, but something that I think we would not be in favor of here, as another example of something that needs to be in place.
Thank you. Yep.
So Atmosphere, their amended plan for the Dickerson site was recently made public by the Planning Commission, or by the Planning Board, sorry. Can you just explain kind of in plain language what happens with that plan? Does the Planning Board stop reviewing it for 6 months, or is this plan not effective because it hasn't gone permitting yet?
I can't affect Park and Planning's decision process. Park and Planning ought to be cognizant of the fact that the council is going to is working on regulations, and, you know, the owner should realize that ultimately they're going to be impacted by whatever winds up in permitting. Whatever you have to do to get a permit, you're going to have to do. So they shouldn't take whatever they get out of park and planning as a guarantee that that's the way this is going to end up at the end of the day.
Okay. But the actual plan can still be approved under this, it's just they can't be issued a building permit?
Yeah, you couldn't build it, but you could have the signed plan.
And just to clarify, the executive order pauses accepting permits, processing permits, or issuing permits for any permit from Department of Permitting Services, and we'll, you know, of course, get you language.
Also, what's important in the ZTA, we have a provision in the ZTA that any project that has not been permitted will come under the ZTA. So that's a really important piece, that even if they go through approval process, they have to abide by anything that's in the ZTA.
Do yeah, we would need to get to the signing for the schedule.
I've had my hand raised for a while. With the 6-month moratorium, I'm just curious about that timeline, because, yes, it'll be a new election, and it'll be new people, but a lot of critics feel like, I think Mr. Geronimo agrees with me, that it should be longer. That it's gonna take more time to assess all of these things that you brought up, and you won't really have a clear picture even at the end of 6 months. So what about, are you, put it this way, are you fairly confident that you might extend it?
It won't be me that extends it. It could be another executive that extends it. But I just, in talking with our folks, 6 months was about as long as they felt we could go with a legal justification. And so as a start, we get through that. And if we decide we need more time, then if that's what the council wants and that's what the next executive wants, then they can do an extension. But mine will go for 6 months. I do think, because this is not an unknown territory. It's not like nobody's done this before. It's not like there's not a lot of information out there. If we're really intent on following and looking at best practices, we should be able to figure that out. I know what I want.
So we can do questions after, but we do need to get to the signing for the county executive schedule. So if you want to go ahead. I don't know.
We were trying to get the shot too, so yes, we still got to meet.
Unlike most signings, this is actually real.
All my signings.
No, I know.
I never have it all.
The ones with 12 pens on it.
We'd like to do a picture with all the advocates as well. I think we'll have to push the table a little forward, or maybe we stand out here with the county executive holding in the middle, but if folks who've been involved want to step up and step behind, that would be great. Great, so if folks have been involved, want to step, maybe someone who, yeah, wants to be. The executive order.
Story of your life.